Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this EBRA cluster interview series. EBRA is, as you know, the European Brain Research Area project funded by the European Commission. It is coming to an end this year. As part of the EBRA project, a series of clusters, working groups, were put together in order for networks of experts to deep dive into some specific brain-related topics. And today we will be discussing the results and the findings of the ECIB cluster, a cluster that focused on imaging biomarkers. My name is Franz Nivelle. I'm the Chief Communications Officer of eBrains, the brain research infrastructure created by the Human Brain Project. And as such, we are a member of the EBRA consortium. And to discuss the findings of the cluster, I'm very happy to be joined today by Professor Thilo van Emmeren from the University Hospital of Cologne, and Professor Stefano Cappa, Professor of Neurology in several academic institutions in Italy. Gentlemen, I would be very happy if you could join me on screen.
Hello, Franz.
Good morning and welcome. Before we get started, in this conversation, Thilo, maybe you want to tell us a little bit more about what imaging biomarkers mean in the context of the cluster.
Sure. So, generally speaking, biomarkers refers to something that can be objectively measured, usually by some machine, and that refers to a biological state or tells you about a biological state or a condition. So in the context of brain imaging or the brain, that can refer to the molecular scope of things. So let's say, for example, local pathology, tau pathology, amyloid pathology, which are hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease, up to the systems level, for example, neural network properties of the brain. So anything that maps the brain in that way can lead to a biomarker.
Thank you very much. And Stefano, what was then the goal, the purpose of the cluster?
Well, there were actually many topics to be discussed, but we decided to focus on one aspect, which we think is really fundamental for biomarkers research in the field of human brain disease. That is data sharing. One core aspect of studying biomarkers, particularly imaging biomarker, which was the specific focus, is that you really need big data in this field. And this is something which can be achieved only by extensive collaboration, and the requirements for data sharing are, as we will discuss further, quite complex.
Okay. Yeah, well, definitely. We're going to discuss this in more details. But before that, just for us to understand, the cluster, was it made up of people from different backgrounds, or who were the members of that network? Can you tell us a little bit more?
Okay, yeah. The idea was to put together a large sample of stakeholders with different approaches to this central issue. So these were many scientific projects which had been supported by the EEC across different instruments, such as the Human Brain Project, the Joint Program for Neurodegeneration, plus many individual projects, plus national organization. The common point was that all these people and initiatives require data sharing. So they were really deeply interested in participating to this discussion.
Okay, well, very interesting. But then deep diving into data sharing, which is indeed a core topic, in research and in brain health related research. what do you find today as being the main obstacles to effective data sharing in order to progress, on the scientific front? And maybe Thilo, you want to give your opinion first? Yes.
I would actually like to start with the upsides, because
Okay.
we always
Yes.
focus on the negatives, but let's
Yes, you're right.
mention the positives first. So it's really something that enriches our scientific capabilities. So first and foremost, you can increase sample size, which means that you can enhance the signal versus the noise. So that's the whole point, basically, of enriching sample size. And as Stefano mentioned, the big imaging data science, which is closely related to artificial intelligence approaches and such, they need big data, which cannot be usually gotten in a single center. So that is only possible with data sharing, and that's a great goal. And the next point is that you can validate certain aspects. So if I, for example, in Cologne, with a cohort in Cologne, find something, a biomarker that could be of interest, for example, for the prognosis of Parkinson's disease, now I want to know if that also holds true for a different sample, let's say in Tel Aviv or in Toronto. And then we can share the data, we can share the pipeline, so they can send us the data, and then we can replicate the findings. So that's also important. And last but not least, it just fosters collaboration between scientists and builds a network, which is basically just fun. It's a lot of fun and engaging. So now basically the obstacles. So the obstacles are, first of all, in terms of compatibility of the data. So if you really want to bring data together, they have to be compatible, which is a task that can be related to harmonization efforts, which have been front and center of many working groups in the past, also in the European Union. And then the next obstacle is the legal aspect. So in essence, all the individuals need to, under the GDPR, need to be okay with that particular purpose of using the data, which can be challenging if you want to share data that's already been obtained for another purpose, for another study, let's say. Now you want to reuse the data, which is kind of unethical not to do, because the data is already there, it can be put to good use. But then you have this legal issue of, now you have to ask the participant again, basically, for that particular purpose, which can be challenging. And then there's this, really tedious and slow bureaucratic process of getting, the legal departments to say yes to the data transfer agreements and all that. But that all refers to the how of data sharing, as Stefano elegantly put it in a discussion before. There's the how, and then there's the why. So we also focused a lot on the why, and I think that's going to be a discussion we need to also deep dive into now in this interview.
Yes, oh, absolutely. And maybe Stefano, you want to get started with this. I mean, sharing data, yes, and there are obstacles as to how this can get organized. But yes, indeed. I mean, where can that lead to, and what kind of advances and progress can that really generate?
Yes, thank you. This is really, as Thilo mentioned, it's a crucial point, because motivation is a basic aspect. Maybe we should introduce the fact that one of the activities of the cluster has been the collection of real-world data about this through a questionnaire which was developed by Thilo and his co-workers, which was able to capture several aspects that is related to the positive side. Most of the people, I would say everybody
100%, yeah.
Who participated in the project agrees that data sharing is fundamental. Well, not surprising result. But what was really surprising is that, well, surprising, not really, because we know about that, but there was a dissociation between this desire to participate and acknowledgement that this is really a crucial component of everyday work, and the fact that quite a few people had limited experience about this for a number of reasons. And maybe Thilo wants to discuss this in further detail, because this is
you already mentioned the highlights. Basically, the study, the survey was done by Dr. Katrin Giel here in the University of Cologne. She organized the whole thing, and really the most surprising aspects were that such a huge amount of people saw huge obstacles despite the fact that they really wanted to engage in data sharing. So it's not about the general, let's say, criticism or skepticism about data sharing. That's not there at all. But it's the main points of, how can we actually overcome these legal and technical boundaries? That's one thing. And then the motivational aspect was also quite clear. So the fact, we have to remember that, in the academic world, the only currency that we are judged by also for evaluation is publications. So of course, there are situations in which data sharing leads to co-authorships in publications, and that's fine. But if we really want to, get this promise of open science going and enrich this this meaningful data sharing world, we need to find a way to incentivize the data sharing itself. So, not by co-authorships, but by some new currency that is introduced that really incentivizes the act of data sharing itself.
Mm-hmm. Did you have the opportunity to discuss that with policymakers or with some other authorities, and what were those discussions leading to?
Yes, so that was actually one of the most surprising aspects for me, that we thought that we found some kind of novel issue, but the European Commission in a way already tackles this. So that's not, let's say, something that's completely new for the policymakers as an aspect. And it's been also, there were a couple of papers also in Nature and Science mentioning that this is a huge problem with the open science framework, that, you cannot, always link the data sharing to publications as a reward, basically, that is needed. So we need a new currency. And of course, the way, so how are you going to introduce that currency? And that's going to take, I think, at least a decade to really get to fruition. But I'm quite optimistic in a way, because now I recognize that there are major efforts at the European Commission level to really look at this in a very strategic way, and how can we measure the impact of data sharing, and how can we incentivize data sharing itself. But I think we need we need a intermediary step, and I think we can discuss what the policymakers can do in addition to that, and what the funders could do to enhance the data sharing.
Oh, absolutely. And it's true that, the European Commission is launching new initiatives like the European Health Data Space, for example, exactly, which is a sign showing that, it is going into that direction and taking steps into this sharing of data. Yes, and funders can also play a very important role. But I was wondering, did you have the opportunity to work with research infrastructures during your cluster work? Because Europe has also developed a series of research infrastructures that allow, several methods of data sharing. And I'm wondering to what extent these tools are being used or not used sufficiently, or not known sufficiently, by researchers to deliver the value that they're supposed to deliver.
Sure. I mean, I wouldn't say that we were in touch with all the research infrastructures, because, as you know, it's kind of overwhelming if you look at what is out there, and sometimes you lose track of things. But we, of course, we're in touch with eBrains, for example, as one of the platforms that are exciting in this direction. And we made a point in saying that really, as you mentioned, France, it's about finding the resources that are already there can help. So we discussed that we should put together like a pamphlet or a flyer basically for principal investigators interested in data sharing. Where can you find important resources to enable data sharing? And that starts with templates for the legal issues, for the DTAs and such things that could be highly valuable. And I think eBrains is a platform that should be highlighted as a technical platform that can be used for that kind of thing. So yeah, there are already many resources that are not really in the clear sight of many researchers, and I think we can do a lot to change that. For example, another finding of the survey was that the FAIR principles, the findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable principles of data sharing, very important. And we found that of these European principal investigators that took part in the survey, a majority didn't know about these principles yet. So we introduced them in a way to these principles. Same goes for the BITS standard, the brain imaging data standard, which is also very instrumental in the interoperability and findability of data. So I think we not only basically contributed to see the obstacles, but also disseminated some of the important aspects to the researchers.
Absolutely. Okay, well, very, very useful. And indeed, I mean, making it known and bringing people to these tools that can help them. Now, Stefano, I also have a question, because we're very often talking about, data collection, data sharing. Now, the point is, of course, also to leverage the value that we can, that we have from this wealth of data. How well equipped are we today with this big data management? I guess this requires access to supercomputing, to artificial intelligence.
Yep.
And do people have access to these resources? Do they have enough access to make sure that we can leverage, the value of data?
Well, France, of course, there's a huge variability in the access to high-tech resources. But I think overall, the main problems stay at the level we were discussing before.
Okay.
Because, I mean, this kind of everybody, well, almost everybody now is doing this. I mean, trying to apply artificial intelligence to, I'm talking about the field of neuroimaging in particular, but I know this happens everywhere. But I would say the field of neuroimaging has been sort of pioneering in this area, because there are the factors that Thilo has been discussing, this need to increase signal in comparison to noise. And there is also the issue of rare diseases. I mean, if you, I happen to be interested, if, for example, in frontotemporal dementia, it's very difficult to put together enough data to apply a big data approach to this disease. By definition, this requires networking. And this is happening, I mean, all over the place. And the tools you were mentioning are typical. So, I mean, of course, supercomputing is not available everywhere, but there are many aspects which do not require actually supercomputing.
Okay.
So what is important is to have a huge batch of data which are harmonized.
Yes.
And this remains the core issue. Why? Because, I mean, this kind of effort has a big impact on research, of course, but also on practical issues such as early diagnosis. I mean, this is a highly translational field. Early diagnosis, evaluation of experimental treatment. I mean, imaging biomarkers are central now in this area.
Yes.
So it's an endeavor which has not only a purely research side, which is of course crucial, but also a lot of practical translational implication.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
I
thank
would,
you.
I would 100% support that. I think supercomputing is a cutting edge technology that in Europe we need to foster. That's for sure. But for the most part, the level of computing power that we're talking about is not supercomputing
Okay.
power, right? So, and as Stefano mentioned, you need to have the data before you can apply, AI to the data. So I think if and that goes back to the funding agencies basically. So I think it's a lot of missed opportunities there because we have data in all universities, health centers that could be shared, that could be translated into big data approaches. But it's hard work to put it in effect, and it's much harder than you might imagine first. So if you engage in that, and we've been engaged in a European and global, in fact, initiative about atypical Parkinsonian disorders, it's such hard work to get everybody, every piece of the puzzle basically together, and we do that without any funding. So it would be great to see some funding that is really dedicated to just sharing the data that's already there. And in fact, that would be so much value for the money, much more than creating new data that is of questionable, let's say, use for the clinical practice.
Yes, well, I think this is a very loud and clear message, Thilo. This is very nice. Now, the findings of the cluster, are you planning to publish something, or what are the steps that are going to be taken in order to disseminate the results of your work? Is there a paper being published, or are there other things being prepared?
Yes, we're currently writing the paper, and the paper is basically the central dissemination of the survey at the center of this publication, and we will, convey the results that we got from the survey. And again, this is a very specific survey that targeted directly to European principal investigators that have experience with multi-center trials at the European or studies at the European level. So quite a knowledgeable people, experts in the field were targeted with this survey. We got about 100 responses, so 100 top-level PIs, let's say, at the European level, really got the responses back to us, and this is going to be at the center. But we are using that basically to elaborate a bit more on the obstacles where we see them and how we can overcome them as a sort of recommendations to policymakers, but also to funders.
Okay, well, that's very very clear and very important. Now, the cluster itself under the EBRA umbrella is coming to an end. But what are your plans now as a network, maybe to continue the work? Are there different steps being taken to pursue the endeavor and to pursue the effort? And is there any help or support needed?
Yes. Yes to both. So we will continue the effort. This cluster is basically a network of networks, right? So
Okay.
it's like
Yes.
an alliance of platforms, of networks, and projects at the European level, but also at the national levels, as Stefano says. And it's still open to people that like to contribute. So it's not
Okay.
something that is a closed club, let's say, but anybody is welcome who can contribute and wants to contribute to that. And we want to continue in this direction, always with the aim to really enable the full potential of big brain imaging data to be used for the benefit of brain health, which is mental health. So I don't distinguish between mental health and brain health. It's the same thing for me. So it's one of the most important aspects of our life, and we need to foster this, and we desperately need a perspective there. So I think we will continue the effort anyways, but it would be great to see some kind of umbrella that takes up this effort.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And Stefano, any last message or concluding words to this very nice conversation?
Maybe just one point that we didn't have the time to mention in detail, but I think is really urgent. It's about the legal aspect, that is the data protection issues. Leaving aside all the complex aspects of the regulation, I think a major problem which is really having a lot of impact on research are the different level of application in different members of the union. This is a topic which I think needs to be urgently addressed. Mm-hmm. Because I mean, if you have different regulation, a different application of the same rules in different countries, this becomes a major obstacle to data sharing. So I think this is an urgent matter. Okay.
Well, I think there are quite a few very interesting asks to the European authorities, from you. Thilo, you wanted to add something else, or?
No, I did a thumbs up to this.
Okay, all right. Yes, definitely.
That really,
yes.
exactly.
Definitely. Listen, I'm sure your messages will be heard, because you are very, very convincing. So thank you very much for this great conversation. Best of luck, with the continuation of such an important endeavor. So we count on you because, as citizens and as potential future patients, we are desperately in need of research advances. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Franz.
Thank you very much for the opportunity today. Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for listening to this conversation. Don't forget that the EBRA, the European Brain Research Area Project Final Conference, will take place on October the 11th. This will be another opportunity to hear about the works and the work carried out by the various clusters. So we hope to see you there. Bye.